Hey there, it's Friday, so let's get into our DIY bucket for this week. There's a whole bunch of really cool, juicy, early summer flowers in here. We got some peonies hanging on, they're still available, and we got some dahlias in, so fun stuff. But we're gonna get started with some white hydrangea, super fluffy. This white hydrangea is gonna be the base for our arrangement. So I'm gonna take these pieces of greens off, so it's nice and clean, because I'm gonna tie this together with raffia wire. So a lot of our other videos, we do the chicken wire on the interior of the vase, but I have found a lot of times with these vases that have a color to them, if the color is laid on the interior of the vase, sometimes the chicken wire can scratch it up. So we're just gonna go ahead and use this hydrangea as our base. So what I'm gonna do is put them together into a rounded mound so that it's large enough to sit over the top of my vase. And then I'm gonna tie them together underneath where my hand is holding it. And this is raffia wire or bind wire. So you're just gonna come around with the wire. You can use another gauge wire if you want, or tape sometimes people use. I find this is the easiest because it's a thin gauge, so you can pull it nice and tight. You're gonna pull it tight here and twist it, twist it, twist it, and then you're gonna trim it, but don't trim it where you twisted it or it'll untwist. And then we're gonna measure this bottom third of our container and lay it over the top. Depending on the size of your hydrangea, it might be a little bit more difficult if they're a little bit shorter, smaller. You just wanna make sure that the edges of the hydrangea are going over the outside of the vase slightly. Okay, and then all of the lateral stems underneath of this and the raffia wire where we tied it, that's going to form a kind of like a grid for us, a natural grid, and then we're gonna put all of the flowers in on top of that. Okay, so we're gonna start building with our greens. So we have this really awesome Dusty Miller foliage in here. So we're gonna trim this. Now, if you have the Dusty Miller foliage, you can trim it a couple of times. As long as the stems are long enough to get down into the water, don't try to use this as one piece. You know, you can cut it into a couple of smaller ones. So the first thing I'm gonna do is cut it right here above these two. So I have a piece that's like this. Take off any of the icky ones, like this one is bent, so I'm just gonna pull that off. So I have a placement like this. Now, I like to take this, squeeze the leaves together, and then go down into my hydrangea. Dusty Miller is beautiful, but it does tend to want to wilt. So I like to give it a little bit of structure in the arrangement rather than having it come out on the sides of the arrangement, because it tends to want to like wilt or flop down. So now we're left with this. So I'm looking here. This is long enough to just go ahead and I'm going to take these two bottom pieces off and go right in to my vase. Just making sure I'm hitting the water and you're good. And I'm going to pull this up and these two kind of go together. So I'm going to trim there and I'm going to trim there. Oops. Here. There. I like to do it as a grouping, even though I'm putting them together from composite parts of the stem. I like to keep them grouped together so it looks like I'm using an entire stem instead of just having one leaf sticking out of here and here and here and here and here. It looks a little bit more purposeful when you keep them grouped together. I'm gonna do the same thing with the second one. I'm gonna try to get at least two placements out of it. Pull the pieces off that I'm not using. I'm going right on in like so. So you see you're breaking up your hydrangea a little bit, but you're also making more of these back and forth areas that are gonna hold our flowers as we go. I'm left with this piece here. So I'm gonna take this long piece off and I'm gonna use this as a piece and this as a piece. But I'm gonna group them together again so that it looks like it's a whole stem, even though we have cut it apart and stuck it back together again. Kind of like a Frankenstein kind of thing going on. I'm use all of my pieces as best I can. Get as much bang for your buck as possible. Okay, so then this is gonna give you a little bit of coverage and it's gonna bring this nice texture and this gray color in. It's lovely. Work my hydrangea through there a little bit so there's no holes. All right, so once we've gotten that all around, we're gonna move on to our lemon leaf. So there's some lemon leaf in the bucket this week. This is kind of just a nice basic green that we like to use here underneath our flowers to just kind of hold it. It's not really a feature, but it adds another color into your green's base, which is nice. I like to usually use like 2 colors of greens so that doesn't seem too boring, I guess. I'm just tucking them in between so you see them popping out like that and being very purposeful with it. So if you have a piece like this that's got all of this stuff going on, you're gonna want to edit it back to a usable piece. And again, if you're going to edit it back to one leaf, then you maybe want to put it in with another one, so it looks like you have the top of a complete piece like that. So again, we're having placements of that color going all the way around so that it looks planned, doesn't look haphazard or messy. Got a couple pieces here and here, put that in there. Sometimes they're just like gigantic and really hard to use, but I'm gonna try to find a way. A little bit of color in. Again, we don't want this to really be a feature. We just want it to be in there for color and to, again, like keep sort of like building more and more out into this grid so that eventually everything will kind of come together in a nest underneath and it'll hold all the flowers moving forward. It's great to use the hydrangea this way because you know, it gives a little bit of color. You know, you can use a purple hydrangea or a blue hydrangea or whatever, bring some color into your arrangement, but also it lets you be a little bit more purposeful for your greens because you're not depending on the greens to hold everything, especially in a geometric container like this. If you're working with a cylinder or square, it's very hard to green one of those with nothing. You know, you just end up with like a ton of greens in there and that's just like a big bush and you have to add your flowers into that. But this way, you can be a little bit more purposeful with your placements, as all things should be, and then you've got a nice base going. All right. First thing going in this time, we have carnations. We've been putting these in the buckets. I'm sorry if you don't like them. I think they're so pretty. We've been getting a mixed box and they're all the antique varieties. So this one has this lovely cherry color, super pretty. So you can use it as is, or you can do that trend online where people pick the middles out to try to make it look like a lisianthus. That's kind of cool too. If you haven't seen that, you basically go into the center here where you can see the center and you're just gonna pull those out. And it just gives like a different look to it. So it looks, instead of being a ball, you end up with something more like that. So it looks more like it has a center to the flower. It's cool, I know, I like it. It's kind of time consuming. I don't do it all the time, but if I'm gonna do it with one, I gotta do it with all of them. So I should just use them as a regular ball. But this is kind of fun, especially if you get white ones. White carnations, you know, pretty boring. You think of them as like a funeral flower. The white carnations look really nice when you pick the centers out because the lisianthus is oftentimes white, so it almost like looks, it's a pretty good doppelganger. There's lots of middle going on there. Very cool. Just a way to reinvent the carnations. They're so long lasting and they have a nice fragrance, and I don't know, I just think they're very, very nice. I don't hate on carnations. Right? So I'm gonna open it up and you're gonna like squeeze this bottom part here, and then we're going to fluff it, and then I'm gonna pick the center out again. So we'll do 3 of these, and then we're gonna have some mums. Again, it's like people want to hate on the inexpensive flowers, but there are so many cool varieties, and you really miss out if you exclude them from your designs because you think that they're cheap or whatever. These are super cool. Look at these. Look at this color. I mean, they're just so pretty, and like this muted color, it goes with the carnation. It's got those little black centers. They're so cute. So we're gonna go ahead and use these little pom-poms in there. I'm gonna put these in kind of in a pinwheel style around, and the idea being to like crisscross underneath, because then what's gonna happen is we're gonna build that nest underneath, that foundation, and there we go. And it's gonna hold all of our other flowers, because we got some goodies and we don't want the good ones. Well, they're all good ones, but we don't want all of the fancy flowers to sink to the bottom of our vase. So we're gonna let these guys do some heavy lifting for us. So I think it's very pretty, going around. So I see it all the way through. There we go. I have like space one more over here. There should be 4 or 5 in your bucket, depending on how they were branched. They came in on long branch stems, so we sort of did it by the bloom. So you might find you have a little bit more, a little bit less. All right, so I'm gonna go here. We should have the same amount of blooms. All right, so we got that going all the way around. Oh, I don't like this one. Let me pull this guy off. There we go. There we go. Much better. All right, now to get into some of the focals. So we have these awesome roses. These are called Free Spirit. We use them in a lot of our work, mostly because they are roughly like a garden rose, but they are long lasting like a regular rose. They have a nice strong stem. So we're gonna go ahead and blow in the center of them. Okay, and then we're gonna take off any shipping petals, probably just like 1 or 2 on the outside, don't wanna overpick them. And then if you wanna give them a little bit of a roll, I love to do this, it helps them start opening up. without having to like touch the petals too much. So that way you don't have to worry about bruising the petals or messing up the bloom. I'm gonna go in with these guys right, so they float right on top of our carnations. And you should have 3 of these. I'm leaving some of the greens on if they're pretty, but if they're ugly, you can pull them off. You just don't want any of the greens on your stems to go underneath your hydrangea and down into the water, because that's gonna scuzz up your water. If it scuzzes up your water, then your flowers aren't gonna last as long, because it will be growing bacteria in there. And especially when we're using a vase that is opaque like this, it's great because it hides all of the ugly water, but you have to be a little extra vigilant to make sure that you're keeping that water clean, because that is ultimately what's going to keep these flowers lasting the longest for you. I'm kind of really digging this carnation here now, so pretty. All right, next up we have these really lovely Canadian snapdragons. They are lavender, but they're just like this really pretty in-betweeny color. We're trying to play off the warm tones and these kind of mauve-y colors that you're getting, these lavenders that are in the lamb's ear, this kind of like lavendery mauve-y kind of color going on in the mum. So I'm gonna go ahead and put 3 of these in. Now I don't like it when they stick out like crazy, so I'm just gonna tuck them all the way down. I'm using them for the movement that they're giving and the color that they're giving. I don't want them like winging out of the arrangement. You can go ahead and strip all of the greens off of these 2. The cleaner the stem, the better. Again, it's gonna keep your water from getting scuzzed up, and it's also gonna make it easier for you to design with them. That's important also. Super clean stem going right on in here. And I'm doing it in more or less a triangle, I suppose. Let me hit my other guy over here so that you can see it all the way around your arrangement. Oops, I'm gonna move this guy over a little bit because everyone's kind of bulking up in that corner there. All right, so you're seeing all these colors, very lovely. Now for the good stuff. So we have peonies. These are a dark pink peony. I'm just gonna fluff it slightly. See, like so. We have 2 of these in our bucket. Unfortunately, these aren't long enough to be able to use them, so I'm gonna peel those off. Cut it on an angle, cut any of these little nodes or knobs off from where side buds or greens came off. And then I'm going to pop this guy right in here. Oops. Right here, sorry. I wanted to catch on something so we can sit up a little bit. There we go. All right. Same with this guy. We have another one in here, same color. Now, these have little outside petals on them as well. And you can pull those off, the little tiny ones, kind of like Brussels sprout, you know, the outside of a Brussels sprout. So just get those off of there, but don't overpick, because sometimes what happens is if you overpick, you'll pick one of these load-bearing petals off and then the whole bloom cracks. So you don't want to do that. All right, so I'm gonna do one here, and I'm gonna do one here. So I'm seeing them on opposite sides of my arrangement, but one in, maybe one out, because then I also have these beautiful dahlias in here, 2 of these. All right, look at this. Look at this. This is like my favorite. I love these ball dahlias. I'm gonna take these side pieces off. I'm gonna use those in my arrangement as well. But for this one, I'm gonna come out in the opposite direction from my peony, boing, and just let it float there, because they are just too pretty and you wanna see them from all of the sides and angles. All right, I'm gonna take these guys off, use them for later. And then I'm gonna take another one of this. I'm gonna tuck this one down more into the center of the arrangement, similar to how I have this peony here. So we got 2 that we're looking at through the arrangement, and then we've got 2 that are coming out to the sides of the arrangement. We don't want to push them in so far that we don't see all of their pretty, so you just wanna make sure that they have enough space to float. And then we have a gentle blow. We have some cute little orange ranunculus in here. So I'm gonna go ahead and tuck those in. These again, hopefully at this point we have enough going on underneath that we can place a stem and it'll just stay put. We want them to float. We don't want them to fall in. So leave your stems on the long side when you put them in at first. And then if they hit the bottom of the vase or they're not where they want, you can always adjust them back, but just make sure you don't cut too much off at the beginning, because if that happens, obviously you can't put that stem back on. So I'm gonna tuck this guy over here. I got one here, let's go up here. Well, okay, I don't want one over here. I need something over here, so I'm gonna go over here. Same thing with these guys. If you see any ugly petals, just pull them off. Just be very careful that it's not load bearing. Touch a guy right here. Touch these little bits off. Sometimes they can get a little ugly. All right, so I got that there. Okay, everybody's kind of spread out, looking nice. Now I'm gonna come back in with all of these cool little dahlia buds just for some extra texture. They'll open a little bit. They obviously won't get as large as like the dahlia, but it's cool to add them in because it just gives that gardeny sort of like soft texture that we like. It gives a little bit of movement. And also, again, back to that bang for your buck, you really want to just try to use everything. This is like one of my buds from the ranunculus that's so pretty. Where'd my other guy go? Here we go. I'm gonna tuck one of these guys up here. Love it. Those little, like they're wearing little hats. Got another one of these. Put that down. Oops, put that down in here. There we go. All right. So now we're pretty well covered with all of our things in our arrangement. I have one more piece of salal here, or lemon leaf, I did not realize. So I'm gonna try to use this strategically. See where I might need a little bit of grain, maybe in the center area here. Again, it's not a feature, so we just wanna put it in there for the color. Any place where you've got like a little hole or nothing is going where you want it. There we go. And we also have this pussy willow in here. Holdover from spring, but it goes super nice with the Dusty Miller because it has these like lovely little fuzzies on there. So you just want to pick, again, any of these off. We're going to edit it down to the size of our container. So you're really just using it as a like a vertical or a linear element in your design. And we're going to see these pretty fluffy little pieces come off. So I'm just going to put 3 of those in. I'm going to go in between my snapdragons. So it's like a little vertical thing in between them. Here's another one. And look at how full and cute that is. It has that same kind of gray, and it kind of like tints a little bit back towards that lavender color that we have in our snapdragons, and that we are seeing in some of those mauve tones. So all coming together here with a little bit of that brown to pull in our mums and their little centers that are so stinking cute. All right, so we got that guy in there. All right, I'm gonna adjust everything a little bit. Getting my space out of the way here. And there we have it. Now, if you were strategic and you wanted to cut your pussy willow like right at one of these little spots so you don't see the end, then you can get a couple more placements out of it too. If you really want to see that all the way through, you can use as much or as little of the stem as you like. I'm just gonna tuck this in here just to get another little piece of that going on. And again, if you cut it and there's like too much of this cut end showing, you don't really want to use it. But at the top of the stem or the branch, you can usually cut it pretty nicely and then not really see much of that. You just see the little fuzzy guys in there. They're so cute. Let's get this out of the way. And there you have it for this week. Hopefully we'll be seeing some more of these dahlias coming in, getting more into the summer type flowers. We still have the peonies in house for all of June, usually into July, depending on where they're coming from. But yeah, so once again, follow along with us every week. We do one of these with our DIY buckets. If you would like to get a DIY bucket, you can go to our website, which you can link through, and order one for yourself. And you'll get one as often as you like. Some people do it monthly, some people do it weekly, bi-weekly, etc. You make the rules and we just deliver it to you. And then you can follow along to make a design, or you can separate them out and put them in all of your other little vases around your house. That is something that a lot of our customers like to do, in bud vases and mason jars and like decorative vases. Or if you feel like designing it all together, come back here, watch me on Friday, design with me, and learn a couple different techniques for how to design the flowers and get inspired for maybe just picking out your own flowers, coming in, shopping our fridge, maybe using grocery store flowers, even though I don't like to suggest that, to get a little inspiration to bring some color into your home, to bring some of this nature into your home, this kind of garden inspiration. Okay, so for this week, I am signing off. Please leave any comments or any questions about our designing or our flowers or whatever, and I will answer any suggestions that you have for flowers you'd like to see. We always like to hear it. So until next Friday, happy designing.